Welcome to the Point Cybersecurity Podcast. Each week, join Eric Trexler and Carolyn Ford to explore the latest in government cybersecurity news and trending topics. Now, let's get to the point.
Hi, welcome to the Point Cybersecurity. I'm Carolyn Ford, joined by Eric Trexler. Hi, Eric.
Good morning, Carolyn.
And welcome, listeners. Today, I want to start our podcast by asking our listeners a favor, Eric. Listeners, if you like our podcast, please share episodes with your friends and leave us a review on your podcast platform. That's how we grow as a podcast and how we're able to stay on the air.
Do we get any more money for that, Carolyn?
Oh yeah, we get loads of money for every review. Not.
Awesome. We'll take them anyway.
But I will tell you, Eric, this is the best part of my job, so I really want to keep doing it, and we need those reviews.
I agree.
Right.
And I think the feedback I get from the listeners is universally positive. So
yeah.
It makes your day. Anyway,
So,
who do we have today?
Well, it's week 3 of Cybersecurity Month. And last week, we had our 100th episode, as you know, with General Stanley McChrystal. And we talked about how to apply the principles from his book, Team of Teams, to cybersecurity.
Yes.
This week, we get personal.
Okay.
So we get to talk, talk about how to find the right people to implement those principles. So our guest today is George Randle, who is strategic advisor to EF Overwatch, former U.S. Army officer, and vice president of global talent acquisition at Forcepoint. Welcome, George.
And the author of Talent Wars.
I'm getting to that, Eric. Come on, let me do my read-in.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you for joining us, George, and forgive our banter.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's great. Thank you for having me.
So, Eric spoiled my thunder. Your book, The Talent War, is releasing November 10th.
The U.S. Marine Corps birthday. Yes.
Excellent.
I have a story for you on that, George.
Yeah, I didn't get a say in that as an Army guy. That was all Mike.
Okay.
So Mike Sorelli, your co-author, former Marine and Navy SEAL, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Carolyn, we were on Dahlonega up on the mountain phase of Ranger School, and it was the Marine Corps birthday. And it's cold, and we're starving, and we're hungry, and we're tired, and we're freezing, and we're miserable. And one hell of a Marine donated a cherry nut cake to my little group, and we split it into, it must have been 20 pieces on the Marine Corps birthday. And I'll tell you what, I'll never forget that.
Oh my gosh.
It was awesome.
So maybe
it must have been 5 calories or so, but we were starving, and we stung to the Marine Corps.
There was a StoryCorps story about this Marine that did this. Like, his grandma sent him this cake. Nah, it was Christmas. Never mind. But same kind of story. So maybe you guys are all kind of nice.
Well, if you're in the military, you tend to be hungry and tired and wet and cold and miserable a lot, but it's a good gig. So anyway, back to the book.
Let's get back to the book. So your book, George, actually echoed a lot of the same qualities that General McChrystal talked about last week. And today we'd like to talk about how to apply those qualities that you talk about in your book, and that, like I said, General McChrystal talks about, specifically to filling the cybersecurity talent gap. Before we dive into that, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and what prompted you and Mike to write this book?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of ground to cover, but the shortest version I can give you is I enlisted in the Army to pay my way through school and kind of got the leadership bug. And I had a very colorful tongue. Not that that's been seen here at Forcepoint in any way, shape, or form. But somebody said, hey, if you think you're so smart, why don't you go be one of those officers? So I kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, what the heck? I was fortunate, spent about 8 years active duty platoon leader XO, company commander, Berlin, Somalia, Gitmo, Colombia, Panama, Honduras, places like that. But after company command, no more leadership roles really for a long time. So I jumped into the corporate world. And so transitioning for a veteran was not easy at that time. Made a bad match with the big box retailer that we talk about in the very beginning of the book. But I actually jumped over into consulting. It was consulting in the federal space there at Fort Belvoir, not far from where you are, Eric. And I had to transfer back to Texas. And so had the opportunity. Somebody said, well, do you know about resource management? And I told a little white lie and said, sure, I know all about it. And so I went and did it for KPMG Consulting, which became Bearing Point and then Deloitte. And they said, well, you have some leadership. Do you want to do recruiting and HR? And so it just kept lumping together, and it just rapidly took off. And I've spent the last 20 years on the talent acquisition side, with the last 10 being generally head of global organizations. And along the way, as I've been able to do it, I built a number of veterans programs. But as I was sitting at Forcepoint, I heard Mike Sorelli on podcast 134, the Jocko podcast, and I reached out and said, well, maybe we should get some veterans here. So we went to breakfast and immediately hit it off, which is pretty strange for a Marine Corps guy and an Army guy. And within a week, he's like, well, he goes, we ought to be writing a book together. We just have so much synergy between the two of us. And so we took his 20 years of special operations and my 20 years of talent acquisition and got busy writing a book. That's really the thumbnail sketch.
Okay, my takeaway was just lie your way into a job.
No,
yeah, basically. Yeah, it was. So the challenge is I needed to get back to Texas, and there was no federal work for me to transfer. And I was so used to the business side of staffing and resource management, really for consulting was internal recruiting. And so I had hired for my teams as a manager in consulting, and I was like, okay, I could figure out how to do this. How hard could it be? And so I went from resource management. They said, well, why don't you take the external recruiting piece? And it just took off from there like, lightning bolt.
So you and Mike have 20 years of experience, give or take, a little more than 20 years of experience each. I don't want to date you too much, George.
Thank you.
You guys come together, no problem. A lot of wisdom in those years. You come together, you both have a shared type of military background. Mm-hmm. You're both in the corporate world now doing work, and you say, let's write this book. Let's educate. Let's get this out there.
Yeah, I wanted to write one for a long time about all the things that I had seen in recruiting. And most of the recruiting managers, and I'm sure, Eric, you've seen this, they say, if you have enough bananas, you can train a monkey to do anything. And that's the way the kind of recruiting was for a while, meaning it was just turning the cranks. It was order taking, filling jobs, cut and paste job descriptions and things like that.
I hate that. I see that all the time. It's like I have 3 heads open. I need to fill them. And management drives you to fill the positions because they're not producing revenue or they're not producing output. Right. There's no productivity if nobody's there. And they drive you, even threaten to take your head count sometimes if you don't fill those slots quickly. And you're like, I want to get the right person.
Well, and I jest about lying your way into a job, but honestly, like at the heart of your book, it's not about lying, but it's about talent. And you actually list, I think there's 9 common attributes for qualities that you want to look for in new hires. And one of those is adaptability. So for you to say, sure, I can do this, you knew yourself well enough and had the confidence to say, yeah, I can do this.
I think for me, the hard part was like, I was on the business side and it was so hard to hire. And the recruiters that I work with didn't know my business. And so I literally sat out and said, well, I could do this better. And so the teams that I've built to the best of my ability have embedded themselves and understand the business problems they're trying to solve. So they're an extension of that business leader, and they understand what the fits are. And they understand that it's not necessarily about performance. That's a great indicator, but performance at one company is not predictive in another. It's a good indicator to look for, but it's not guaranteed to predict.
I agree with that. In fact, my favorite chapter in the whole book is chapter 4, Hire for Character,
Train for Skill.
Right?
Yep.
Because you can read a resume, Carolyn.
Right. And one of the takeaways too, you guys make a point in the book that if you required 5 to 7 years to be a Navy SEAL, we wouldn't have any Navy SEALs because they don't have the experience, right?
Right.
Yeah. By
candidates
default,
have no experience.
Yeah. You couldn't go to a high school. You couldn't go anywhere. Mike makes the point, hey, maybe you send them over to the French Foreign Legion. Maybe you send them somewhere else when you get that experience, come back. So, by default, they had to look at the character attributes. And then they had to train for skill. And, what's interesting that we make in the book, and there's 1 or 2 fine lines in there, but at periods of high stress, chaos, uncertainty, that's when skills start to degrade. And that's when character comes through. So the 9 attributes of drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, effective intelligence, team ability, which is huge that a lot of people don't evaluate for, curiosity and emotional strength, those things are far more predictive of success. And in today's rapidly changing business environment, if you don't have those, you're at a distinct disadvantage.
Well, and talk about stressors right now, right? Our environment right now. But so my question is, love this list.
Yeah.
How do you identify these when you're interviewing? I mean, you get 20, 30 minutes with people. How do you say, yep, this person has these 9 attributes?
Well, the challenge is, first of all, and let me kind of digress a little bit. The challenge is very few people get upstream, and very few people look at their teams and say, what am I missing? A, and B, what is success on this team? And looking at the most successful people on that team, and then looking at those attributes that are paying dividends, that are predictive of success in that particular team, whether that's product, service, sales, it doesn't matter. They're each going to have, and not everybody's going to have all 9 of these, but each particular role might have 3 or 4 that stand out that you need to be looking for. And if you know those before you make the job description, then you can build an interview process that tests for those things. But
George,
most people are like in that moment, oh, here's cut and paste. Go do it. We need this experience. It's all objective traits.
I think you talk about, really the foundational question is, do you know what success looks like? Do you know what you need as a business to do the job? But Carolyn, I'll tell you from my experience, you get a ton of glowing resumes in all the time, right? Talent acquisition does a great job of handing you resumes, and they're almost all qualified on paper. The process will weed people out otherwise. Now, how many people are lying about their experience? Well, you got to work through that. You got to figure that out. But most resumes meet the requirements of the job if you wrote them appropriately. It's really getting to that character, to that mindset, though. And I'll share something I read in the book, George, which you hit me right between the eyes on this one, right? People who don't quit, people who are calm under pressure, people who know how to beat the impossible, people who just keep going. And I saw that in the military, as I looked at pre-Ranger and then Ranger School. The people who made it weren't the big, muscular guys. In fact, a lot of times they couldn't handle the endurance work of it, or the stress under pressure. Because many times, they were athletes or something. They were number 1 in whatever they did, and they didn't have the same type of pressures that would just break you down. I mean, some of these military schools, Carolyn, are meant to break you down and see when you will quit, when you will break, and how and why, and teach you through that process. So people who don't quit, I think, to me, that's the number 1. And then you get into the characteristics that the job, that the skills that are required there.
Yeah, the theme for me was resiliency. Like it kept coming through in the book.
I'm probably in the most masochistic profession you could imagine in talent acquisition, because you have 2 sides of the equation that can both say no to the deal. And you have to have resiliency. But could you imagine hiring somebody into sales or into product that's never failed, that's never had a setback? They collapse at that point.
The first time they hit the breaking point, the first time they have a problem, and they're lying to you anyway. Yeah. Life, everybody has failures.
We talked to Don Robertson, who was a mentor of mine at HPE. And one of the main things is he dug right in. Tell me about your biggest failure. Walk me through how the failure, he wants to know how the failure occurred. He wants to know what you did at each step and how you recovered, how you course corrected. And Tracy Keogh, who we interviewed in the book, who's another mentor of mine, she is the CHRO of Hewlett Packard. She's very much the same way. If they haven't failed, I don't want them on the team, because they're going to fail. And at some point, whether it's product, it's service, it's sales. I mean, how many deals have you seen salespeople, and they do a couple $1 million deal, falls through for whatever reason beyond their control, and they collapse, and they're not willing to get back at it. But the people with resiliency will go, yep, okay, what could I have done better? What did I learn? And then get right back at it.
How do I prevent this from happening next time? Exactly. Where do I go from here? And it's that adaptability or resiliency that allows you to change and to go. I agree.
It's very much served me throughout my career, could you even imagine what a career without failures looked like? I don't even know that it would be a career. It would be like a vacation on the beach, and it just is a utopia. It's something that doesn't exist in any business whatsoever. You're going to have setbacks, you're going to have failures. And how you deal with those, how you get up, how you drive forward, and how you win is everything.
Well, in the McChrystal podcast, Carolyn, from last week, he mentions a topic of the organic learning process, how quickly cyber goes. On Monday, this could be your adversarial threat. On Tuesday, it's something different. If you don't have that ability to adapt, if you don't have that ability to keep going, how do you deal when the adversary changes? How do you deal when the problem space fundamentally rotates or shifts on you? You've got to be able to do that. If not, I think you need to get into piecemeal work. You need to get into something where you can continue to do your job without a lot of external impact.
Yeah, so the adaptability and the resilience, like I said, those were themes throughout the book, but in another lifetime, I'm going to reveal something here. I was an 8th grade English teacher. I had 180 students every day, and I could have the best laid lesson plan. It was beautiful. Like every little detail, right? I never once was able to execute one of those lesson plans. But my lessons were usually really good because I would remind myself every night, every morning, adapt, adjust, and do what the students need. And we always had a great time. And I've been able to carry that through into my new life, my new career.
School teacher to marketing. Adaptability.
Well,
right?
I actually went school teacher.
Their characteristics, though, other than skills.
Right.
Right. Because I bet school teacher is not, George, you would probably know this better than Carolyn. I bet school teacher is not a prerequisite for marketer.
Not at all. Well, most people wouldn't look at it. That's the thing that drives me nuts is there's so many people that will look at a resume. They don't see the competitor. They don't see those objective, career enhancing roles in that function. And so the resume's given 5 seconds and then it's
toss it away.
Yeah. Well, and I've even almost pulled that off. I mean, it was a long time ago, but the truth is teaching school for that small amount of time, it ingrained in me the need and the ability to be adaptable.
And if you don't, and this is one of the things that I've tried to do is, when I walked into Forcepoint, the talent acquisition team was, for lack of a better term, was a dumpster fire at the time that I walked in, if I were going to put it bluntly.
Wait, how long have you been here?
Little over 2 years. And I mean, I had everybody screaming at me, but it's been a long process to help teach the recruiters to look at the resume and look beyond the competitor, look beyond the experience. And for, if you get a really good talent consultant that's embedded in the business, they'll look at that and say, okay, well, there's a teacher. First of all, there's got to be resiliency. There's got to be just, the ability, the positive attitude, the curiosity, the drive to keep doing that, and the altruism. So there's a lot of things just looking at that one job function that if you understand talent that you can pull out of what somebody's done. It does not need to be the lazy, easy way of going, oh, they worked at this company. They're a competitor of ours. They did this role. Let's see if we can get them, throw a little bit more money and have them move laterally.
Well, and so there's a good question. How do we get people to choose cybersecurity? I mean, I fell into the job, Eric. To be honest, I got recruited away from teaching to do corporate training, and my career went from there. And I've never left I've never left high tech.
Right.
So how do we attract that talent that they weren't even thinking of cybersecurity?
Well, I think it's a two-part question. George, we'll let you answer in a second. But I think, how do we advertise? How do we market? How do we attract the talent, right? Mm-hmm. There are 2 million plus jobs open right now across the globe in cybersecurity, right? So there's a huge market that pays well, a lot of flexibility at work. It's relatively good work, right? So that's, to me, how do we attract the talent is one thing, but two, there are 2 million jobs available across the globe there aren't enough cybersecurity people out there. We're not
Nope.
printing them in schools. So you can't even take a resume and go out to market and say, or a job description, I should say, go out to market and say, I'm looking for somebody with 5 years or 10 years or 15 years of cybersecurity experience, because there simply aren't enough of them. You may get some. It's not as bad as the Navy SEAL argument they talk about in the book. Right? There are some people, but you need artists, you need teachers, you need creative thinkers, you need people who have the characteristics, maybe not the native skills just yet. So hire for characteristics, hire for character, train for skill. So how do we find them? And how do we let them know we're here? How do we bring that peanut butter and chocolate together? Back to you, George.
Well, I think there's 3 points. I think cybersecurity is an easy sell when you find the right people. It is always cutting edge. It is always advancing. It's always changing. It's not static. And not to name any particular company, but there's some jobs that are just repetitive, that don't change fast enough. And people generally like change. They like challenge. So I think cybersecurity is an easy sell. For me, one of the first things that I do, when we do finding the people with those skills is not hard with modern technology, and you have good recruiters. It's easy to find the people, though people with cybersecurity experience, to your point, Eric, it is high demand, low availability is what we call it. So you have to be thinking creatively. You have to be thinking differently to look for those people that we could build into and train those skills to. But the other thing I do is I sell the leadership. That is one of the easiest things, because it's funny that talent acquisition generally over the course of my career hasn't done this, which is when people leave a company, they don't leave the company, they leave the boss. But on the flip side of the equation, the recruiters aren't selling the boss. And that's one of the best things, because we put in the book that talent plus leadership equals victory. So if the recruiting teams can find the talent and partner and know what a success profile is, and then you have leaders that are dedicated to being better and better leaders every day, you sell that to the people with the talent skills. It's just convincing a number of people to get out of that mindset of they have to have this specific experience. Hire for those character attributes, and you can go a long, long way.
Yeah, we see this in the government, where you'll see a CIA, an NSA, and pick your government agency, where they're not paying the most, right? You're on government income. There are a lot of upsides to the job, but there are a lot of downsides, right? But certainly pay isn't one of them. But they talk about mission. They talk about what they're doing for the country, and they give them that path. And to me, that's leadership coming through. This is what we do. You can go make more money over there. And if you care about the money, we'll go over there and make more money. But if you care about the mission, if you care about protecting America or the country you live in, if you care about whatever you care about, to me, George, that's the leadership coming through.
It is.
Taking those aspects of the role, because everybody's job is different. Every company is different. They're striving for different things.
We made a point to cover that in the book. You can't be paying bottom of the market to find great talent. Money matters, but it's not everything. It's the mission, it's the value, it's the empowerment, it's the challenge that you give them. That's what true talent thrives on. That's what you need to be selling. So when we talk about building a talent mindset within a company, we also talk later in the book that you have to be advertising that talent mindset, that our leaders are committed to growing you, to training you, to mentoring you, to coaching you. That's everything. And, when on a kind of a little bit of a side note, I've coached well over 10,000 veterans over the last 20, 25 years. And you get them coming out and they're like, well, I've been making, that government stepped pay, and now I want to make bank. I want to make money. And one of the first things I tell them is, if you're chasing dollars, you're going to get your heart broken every time. You chase the opportunity. You chase the leadership.
The dollars will come.
The dollars will come, and it happens every time.
Well, and I think it's important that, I would imagine this to be true with veterans, that they need to feel a purpose. So going from teaching, where I made a huge impact on these kids' lives, I loved it. It was so rewarding.
Yeah.
Moving into the corporate world, I felt lost. Yeah, the money was there, but I was like, why? This doesn't matter. And
right. Why am I doing this?
Yeah, but you know what? Cybersecurity, I find purpose here. I believe this is incredibly important to our children, to our nation. And I wonder if that might be an aspect of getting people into this field, is showing them the purpose here.
Yeah. And you can show them purpose across a very, very broad range. You know, the stuff that we're doing in government, although you can't get into some of the details, is there's no value you can put on it. That mission is what people are dying to be a part of. But then you could even break it down more simply, you know, make it personal to them. Talk about their privacy, talk about their exchanges, you know, as simple as, you know, protecting the, you know, their banks that they use, protecting their transactions. You can make it personal. You can take it from the individual all the way up to protecting a country. And that's what's unique about cybersecurity. And I think it's just such an easy, to say it in a kind of a crass way, it's a very sexy job, you know, because there's so much that you can do across the spectrum. And I absolutely love it. And I was very grateful that I could get into it.
Yeah, it's why I've stayed in it for as long as I have. And quite frankly, why I've stayed at Forcepoint. I don't want this to be a Forcepoint commercial, but you know, we're talking about leadership and teams, and I'm on the government team at Forcepoint, and there is a tremendous sense of mission and purpose on that team. And it's kept me there. And cyber in general, I've been able to do many different things with my career here because cyber is changing so much and so fast.
You guys might find it funny, but I know that you're all fans, and my partner in crime and the person who I think is the best ever I've seen in the function, Karen Clark, you know, as our, you know, vice president of HR business partners. Our interview when she conducted of me we talked for an hour, but the interview was about 2 minutes because I think I was the first TA person with government experience. And the government side in cyber is different by a long shot from your general consulting, where you're running task orders and you're doing simple stuff. You have a mission and you can see the difference that you're making every day. Selling that side of Forcepoint, that's a walk. I mean, it's still, don't get me wrong, if you've got somebody sitting doing with a company that's got a great mission, but it's such an easy sell. We have such a strong leadership team over there that it's very, very easy to talk to people about the great mission we have and how the leaders are going to invest in them over the course of their career.
Yeah, and
okay, I want to take this back though.
Well, let me finish. So I was just going to say our leaders are strong, but it's a broad thing. It's almost like that living organism, Eric, for me, where we have a lot of individuals who possess those leadership talents, who possess those 9 attributes that you list in the beginning of the book, George.
Yeah, well, and I love working with those people, you know, especially because at any company, one of the worst things you're going to run into is ego. Doesn't matter the company. And you can see a ton of people here with humility that do operate like Mike and I did writing this book with the best idea wins. It's not about your idea. It's about accomplishing the mission. And that's so easy to get behind. Then you know you're a part of something.
So I want to go back quickly to, Carolyn, you mentioned the word purpose. And when I'm looking for a character and mindset in an individual, you know, I'm looking for what is their purpose? Why do they want this job? Do they just need the money? Is it just a stepping stool? You know, they're going one level up from individual contributor to manager, or they're going to a bigger part of the business. Why do they want it? And I will many times ask questions around purpose, because I think, and George, you have much more experience than I do here, but I think when you get down to what is your purpose? Why are you here? You know, I think you start to really get into character.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I want to be careful how I word this next portion, but I put it in a video. Where people over rotate on experience the most tends to be the most senior and executive levels, and they don't dig in. And I do a 30-minute interview with all the execs I see, and it's all about character. It's all about the why. Why did you do this? How do people see you? What are the attributes that you hope people see in you? And then tell me how you use those across the spectrum of your life. Because I'm a big believer, those character attributes, when we interview for them, they show up in life, your personal life, and they show up in your professional life. But once you get digging into those character attributes, it's like this picture is painted very clearly for you as to how they will fit and succeed on your team or not. Alternatively, somebody, you can tell when somebody's not humble. One of the attributes we have in here is integrity. When's the last time that you've ever seen anybody in an interview tell us when they had to hold the line on integrity? That question just doesn't even come up. It's almost taken for granted. But some of the biggest failures in corporate America have been failures
Lack of integrity.
Lack of integrity.
It's actually on my behavioral interview checklist. I have
That's awesome.
I have a sample set of questions that I rotate through depending on who I'm talking to, and
Ooh,
that's
Eric,
important to me.
We should share those with our listeners, because for me, it's where the rubber meets the road. Like, how do we implement this stuff? We can talk about it all day long, but stuff like that is very helpful to me.
And they're relatively easy questions, right? Tell me about a time when you needed to do, the right thing, or make a choice between the right thing and the more lucrative thing, right? And I forget the exact wording, but they're relatively easy questions to ask to get down to the integrity component. But in the few minutes, go ahead, George.
I asked somebody, tell me the most senior person you had to disagree with publicly and make your case for, and how did it turn out?
So, I would say let's end on that with George. Like, what do you want to leave our listeners with? And then I'm going to ask both of you if you want to share some interview questions that I can share with our listeners in our show notes.
I have all kinds of crazy questions that I use. A couple things I would leave with. Number one is as Jocko, when he wrote in our forward, is that selecting talent is a subset of leadership, and you have to master that skill. Second is that human capital is the only true competitive advantage that you can hope to maintain. Everything else around you will change so rapidly that if you don't have people with the majority of those character attributes, you're not going to win in your particular space. Talent is everything. The last thing is, and I wanted to point this out as kind of a small segue, and I don't know if you knew this, Eric, but we did it, we looked at the data. CHROs are generally paid 1/3 of all of their C-suite counterparts. CHROs aren't viewed as a strategic asset as much as they should be. So the point I'd leave you with is that human capital has to be managed as carefully and with the same rigor and the same level of importance as your financial capital.
I would argue with more, because it is the primary raw material or input into the business, which then generates capital down the road.
Exactly.
If you have substandard people, you will derive substandard results. If you have top people, they will figure out a way to evolve and get the business moving.
Yep. Every time. So do you want the weird questions, Carolyn?
I do. I love weird questions.
So the one thing is so if I'm interviewing, and I predominantly interview the execs now, the thing is I don't want it to be anything that they're prepared for, ever.
Right.
I want it to throw them off. And so there is one question at the end of a series of questions that I ask, as I said, I want you to think about your best friends. And I said, your best friends are the people that you would trust completely in the event of your demise to erase the contents on your phone before it was made public. I said, do you have those people in your mind? I said, all right, I ply them with alcohol. I sign an NDA. What are the 3 top traits that they say describe you? And so I get a number of things. I get to see how introspective they are. I get to see if they're tap dancing, because if they give me some tap dance answer, I'm going to call them on it. The other thing is I know what's aspirational to them by having them list out those traits. Even if they don't possess them in spades, I know what they're striving for. And then I follow up real quickly. I said, okay, what's the number one pet peeve, the most irritating behavior about you that your friends would say? And you can tell immediately if somebody's being authentic. You can tell if they're introspective. And you can tell what's really important to them with just those 2 simple questions. And that's, over and above getting into integrity and stuff like that. And There was just real quick, I don't know if we have time, but so there was one person who was a pain, and Eric, I'm gonna let you guess who this was.
I don't even want to know. I'm going on mute.
Absolutely pain, taking him through, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, come on, would you just answer the question? I said, I'm not giving you the offer. I don't care if our CEO says you get the offer or not. What is the irritating behavior? And he slammed his hand down on the table and he says, fine, I'm ADHD. There, I said it. And
Nice.
Nobody had any idea. And I said, it's great. He still got the job, but at least we knew, who that person was at their core. And he had come through and knocked off several examples of especially the effective intelligence and the curiosity that were just off the charts.
I'm not going to lie. I'm dying to ask both of you both of those questions, but
I'll give you my answer later, either another podcast or privately. I'm no secret for me.
So,
Anyway, George, thank you so much.
Yeah. This has been great. Yeah. And thanks to our listeners. Again, please leave us a review, share the episode, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us on the To The Point Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Forcepoint. For more information and show notes from today's episode, please visit www.forcepoint.com/govpodcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or the Google Play Store.